Kishore Mahbubani for his broad sense of how you think the next 5 years of Xi Jinping's reign are likely to be. And I'll start first with the question that's uppermost in the minds of people in India. How will his posturing militarily, diplomatically, economically towards India change over the next 5 years?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to your program. You're right. Xi Jinping has emerged as probably the most powerful person in the world today. He has complete command and control of the world's second largest economy in a way that Joe Biden cannot have over his own economy. And at the same time, it's very important that if you step into Xi Jinping's mind, his main priority is number one, internal stability, and number two, dealing with the challenge from the United States. So I don't think, to be very frank with you, that when he wakes up in the morning, India appears in his mind very early. In terms of the challenges and priorities that he has to deal with, I think he knows that China is going to have, in a sense, a life and death struggle against the United States, at least over the next decade or two. So he's very focused on making sure that China is not in any way derailed by this American campaign against China. And what the United States is doing is perfectly logical. The United States is trying to ensure that it remains the number one power in the world. It knows it has about 10 years to keep its status as the number one power in the world. So it's launching this trade war, this technology war, to preserve its number one status. And so Xi Jinping has to deal with that every day. And he knows that that's the real challenge that will define him in Chinese history. Can he succeed in this struggle?
So what's your sense, given the fact that the kind of economic measures that the Biden administration is taking against Chinese tech companies, against Americans who work in China, against Chinese Americans, to make it difficult for China to acquire these kind of high technologies, a lot of which they've simply stolen from the West, now that they won't have as easy access as they did in the past, how much of a setback could it be for China's technological growth?
If you look at a recent Wall Street Journal report, and the Wall Street Journal, as you know, is not pro-China in any way. The Wall Street Journal report says that Chinese scientists now produce more tier one, peer-reviewed academic papers on science and technology than either American scientists or European scientists. So the Chinese have clearly been capable of developing their own science and technology. Now let me emphasize that the recent moves taken by the US against China, especially in the area of semiconductors, are going to hurt China, are going to be very painful for China, no question whatsoever. But at the same time, the fundamental question which I keep asking my American friends is, what is your long-term strategy? That's a thesis of my book, Has China Won?, where I quote a one-on-one lunch I had with Henry Kissinger. And he told me that the fundamental problem the US has in dealing with China is that US doesn't have a long-term strategy for dealing with China. What would constitute a win for the US? Because can the US derail China from its economic growth? It cannot. Can the US overthrow the Chinese Communist Party? It cannot. And can the US isolate China? It cannot. So what exactly is the US trying to achieve? So I actually recommend a wiser course of action for the US of using multilateral rules and institutions to try and constrain China, and that would be the better strategy for the United States. And frankly, the rest of the world would prefer to have a multilateral solution to this huge struggle that will affect all of us.